I've put down the recessions, downturns we've had in the market. We had two fairly sharp negative falls at the start of the 70s from oil crises. We've now had, depends how you count them, 7 or 8 in the last 15 or whatever it is years, 20 years. So that's starting to come down to sort of 1 every 2 or 3, 2.5, 3 years where we're getting a significant downturn. You can't use that for your building blocks. The consultants are looking for products, as I said, that are market insensitive, produce consistent returns with limited downside, and have low correlation to the traditional assets. Now, the sort of funds I'm talking about are probably going to end up with returns between 8 and 13% per annum as a pretty regular event, and minimal or no downside risk. And that's the building block that a lot of people are seeing is where we're heading tomorrow. We complement that building block with investments in more traditional asset classes, often maybe targeting higher risk than what one would have done normally with traditional listed investments. And this money will tend to end up more with some of the boutique managers that have been developing quite strongly. The major negatives or objections whenever you raise these issues is a lacking of understanding what is the product about. It's the black box syndrome, as I call it. People don't understand what these things are about. A lack of exposure to these developments in derivative markets. The region doesn't effectively have derivative markets, so unless someone's gone and lived and worked overseas, it's something you're not really going to have a great deal of experience in operating in. The inability to gain exposure and service from alternative fund managers. They're often, like one of the better ones in our stable, is 2 people. So the chances that you're going to get one of those 2 people coming to visit you are not very good. And the other thing is these products have very little history. 5 years is a long-term track record. Looking forward, what does it mean for here? At some point in time, the region will move in towards this part of the market. It's going to happen, I think, without question, because that's the advice that you'll find you'll start to get. I believe that the region can start moving towards this type of investment fairly rapidly. If they can do that, we'll start to get a reduction in the volatility of returns. There I've sort of mentioned the market volatility, illiquidity, lack of diversification. I think particularly the last one becomes very relevant when you look at commodities, the commodity-based economies that we have here, that a large part of the environment is headed that way. If you look at PNG, it's obviously had 2 or 3 very, very good years. It's all based around the commodity cycle. It isn't a flash-in-the-pan cycle. The LNG project is a long-term project which is going to produce tremendous benefits. But you will find that some of the returns, if the world does have a major downturn, it will have a significant impact on it. These funds will provide a good hedge against inflation, promote the development of local industry, and I think that's one of the key things that, particularly the objectives of this conference is to help develop local industry and develop the local skills within the finance industry. And this will happen, like we will be recruiting 6 investment people looking at over the next 12, 18 months. Most of those will spend quite a bit of time in Sydney learning and understanding more about how the industry operates. And one of the key planks of what my objectives is to develop the local skill bases. And if we can do that through the region, even better. Excuse us. Thanks. The way in which we can do this is to operate through what I call manager of managers. It's not a new concept, it's been around for quite a long time. But to do it, you need someone locally, and that's the rationale behind Pac Wealth, that we actually are here to be literally next door to our potential clients. We can communicate with them, let them know what's happening, answer their questions. So you actually have someone here to service you. And as you can tell from my history, I've got that job, and I actually do know something, I think, about investment markets. What we then do is invest via the manager of managers, who can access leading world fund managers, not just members of our own group, but literally the best there are in the world. Outsource due diligence issues, which gets to this black box thing, and I'll come up to that again in a minute. Competitive fees. The fees to a lot of these funds are quite high. By using volume in the way we operate, we can actually get those fees down to probably 25% of what you might pay in a one-off hit. And the other big part is you get very good administration and reporting, because you'll be virtually required to have an offshore custodian administrator to your funds, and you'll get exceptionally good administration and reporting on that. The other one is to actually look at your currencies as a separate issue. Certainly in PNG there's been a major problem with the superannuation funds and also industry in being able to hedge back into the kina. And given the strength of the kina over the last few years, that has caused some quite significant losses. It's two things. One, we believe actually we can offer a much better deal in that area than what's being done generally at present. But the other thing is that it shouldn't be just looking at, say, particularly the kina against the Australian dollar, or to a lesser degree the US dollar. It's also looking at cross-currency hedging. And that, in a sense, you make it a separate asset class and start to manage that as a separate asset within the portfolio, and look to add value through currency. That's not an easy concept, I think, in the region, because of, particularly here, because of the strength of the kina. That's not always going to probably be the case. I'd have to say at the moment it doesn't look like changing much in the next year or two, but who knows what's out there a little bit. As I mentioned, I'll come back to some of the issues that I just raised, and in specific I'll look at two of the managers that are within the stable that we relate to, Ascalon Capital Managers and Advanced Asset Management. And as I note there, one of the partners in one of the hedge funds in Ascalon is a director of my company. Ascalon is wholly owned by the Westpac Group and effectively invests in hedge funds, commodity funds, long equity funds, private equity funds. The hedge funds it focuses on are high alpha. Alpha is the return apart from the market. So if the market's up 10,